Number 14, SMU 2024 preview on Good Morning College Football. Hello and welcome to episode 64 of Good Morning College Football. I am Nicholas Ian Allen of CFB Winning Edge and CampusToCanton.com. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday morning. Also, thank you for coming back after we were off on Wednesday. We have a full preview of potentially the most underrated team, at least as far as most expect a potential top 25 type team in college football with the SMU Mustangs, who are, of course, entering their first season in the ACC, first time in a power conference in nearly 30 years, but looks like a really excellent team on paper. We'll discuss why our power rankings are so high on the Mustangs, how they compare to some of the other rankings systems in college football and human polls, things of that nature, where our numbers differ and potentially why, and whether or not we think we might have uncovered one of those really underrated teams, or are we overrating SMU compared to most everyone else as far as preseason expectations go. But of course, before we dig into that, want to hope that you will subscribe to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. We very much would appreciate you liking this video there. That helps us of course, to continue to grow, continue to bring these in-depth team previews to you ahead of the 2024 season kicking off. And of course, we very much appreciate if you would give us a chance at CampusToCanton.com. You can sign up for as little as $2.99 per month, which we believe is the best value fantasy football membership in the industry. That lower tier $2.99 per month gets you instant access to premium articles, VIP Discord chat, rankings, whether you're into college fantasy football, Devy, the Campus to Canton version of the game, where you have both a college and NFL side of your fantasy football team. But then also premium tools, including one that is available to our NIL tier members, the new and improved roster management and draft tool, where if you sign up for a yearly NIL subscription through the end of this week, you get 15% off that annual membership. So would absolutely love to have you sign up as an NIL member, but of course also for access to everything that we discuss here in our usual thrice weekly Good Morning College Football team previews, our CFB Winning Edge team profiles, our returning production database. We're putting the final touches on our stat projections, which should be out in a week or so. All of that is available to our All-22 and C2C Winning Edge tier members. So if you have questions, I know we've got a lot of different tiers. Certain things are part of each, but reach out to me, reach out to Campus to Canton as well. We want to make sure that we're there and able to answer any questions you may have about finding the right tier for you. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit of news before we get to SMU. You might have seen it earlier this week. News broke that Utah State informed its head football coach, Blake Anderson, that it planned to fire him. Reading from an ESPN news piece here, Utah State informed Blake Anderson of its intent to fire him after an external investigation of alleged non-compliance of Title IX policies that, quote, require full and timely reporting of disclosures of sexual misconduct, including domestic violence. This was announced on Tuesday. So we won't dig too much into the details, but Very serious situation, of course. Anderson, of course, has also dealt with a lot of personal, just really, really tough things in his personal life, with the loss of his wife and then later son. But of course, these types of allegations are incredibly serious as well. And from a football specific standpoint, defensive coordinator Nate Dreeling is going to be the interim head coach at Utah State. Dreeling spent last season, he comes from New Mexico State, where it was part of a major turnaround there for the Aggies, competed for a Conference USA title. So replacing Anderson, certainly, especially this late in the season, could have major impacts on the field in 2024. Anderson led Utah State to a Mountain West championship in 2021. The last two seasons, the Aggies were 6-7, lost in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl last season. But he also was the offensive play caller, was expected to handle officially the offensive coordinator duties in 2024, has a track record of producing, just having very productive receivers, specifically from a college fantasy football standpoint. There's a lot of, sort of a list, one after the other, of very productive wide receivers. Jalen Royals was expected to be one of the top wide receivers in college fantasy football this year. The expectation was he is going to put up huge numbers. Still may, but things potentially could change, not only without your head coach, your offensive play caller, but when we see a transition from an offensive-minded head coach to now a defensive-minded interim head coach, brand new, no head coaching experience at the FBS level, can raise a lot of questions. The way that we work on or adjust Utah State's power rating based on this news. We do have a head coach rating that is specifically team performance based. Anderson was roughly FBS average in our head coach ratings, maybe a few ticks below FBS average. So we removed him from the calculation, added Dreeling, who is given a generic 75 is the way we do it. Think of it very similar to our video game ratings based individual player ratings. We put our coach ratings on the same scale. So, first timer as a head coach at the group of 5 level, we give a very generic 75 rating. That was a little bit of a downgrade for Utah State. Didn't have a major impact as far as our win total projection. With Anderson in, we had Utah State projected for 5.99 wins this year. Our current projection has the Aggies at 5.66 wins. But you could make the argument, not only was Anderson so important to the success of this team as a head coach, but the offensive coordinator duties, the play calling duties, maybe increase his level of importance. I personally cannot, am not willing to assume that this is going to be a situation where Utah State just completely falls apart. Is this a Bobby Petrino at Arkansas situation? Is this a Mel Tucker at Michigan State situation, where those teams, early on, it was just clear, okay, this is not the same team on the field after this change? Or is this kind of like what we saw at Northwestern last season, where the Wildcats just completely overachieved based on expectations? Coming into the year, Northwestern was very, very low in our power rankings. The loss of Pat Fitzgerald around this time in the calendar. There were certainly thoughts, and I had a similar opinion. This Northwestern team might not win a single game. They overachieve, go to a bowl game, coach of the year. And who's to say that Utah State couldn't do something similar? I personally don't expect it, but I also sort of trust the way that our ratings work. There are certainly people out there who went out and immediately just hammered the Utah State under regular season win total when sort of the rumors were swirling and this news was breaking. That, I understand. I understand the reasoning for that. I personally was not ready to do that. I take a little bit more of a cautious approach, I suppose. But partly it's just because I've gotten to the point, as boring as this may be, I've basically removed my own personal opinion from most of this sort of stuff as far as decision making goes. I just rely on the numbers. We have a process to do adjust based on head coach movement. Didn't cause a major issue, didn't cause a major change. What will, though, is if players like Royals or other Utah State players, because the transfer portal will open when Anderson is officially removed as head coach, those players start to leave, the ratings will fall. That will have a bigger impact. So I'm sure we will address this a little bit later on. But you are likely here to discuss or hear me perhaps discuss our SMU team preview. SMU, we talked about it a little bit in what was that? March, April, when we were working through our team profiles. And making those updates from 2023 to 2024. And SMU, based on a high ranking as far as returning production goes, they're top 10 nationally, and a team that had a lot of success in the American Athletic Conference. Went 11-3 last season, undefeated in the regular season in conference play. Were able to overcome what looked like a really ugly injury to quarterback Preston Stone. Kevin Jennings steps in, leads SMU to a win over Tulane in the AAC championship game. Rhett Lashley, guided this team very, very well. They ranked 13th in overall team performance, top 20 on both sides of the ball. This was legitimately a very, very good team. Brings back a ton heading into the ACC. And as a result, they ranked really, really high in our initial power rankings. I believe they were number 7 when, if we just did not make any changes at all. They were number 7 in our ACC, in our FBS power rankings before they became official. They were our highest rated ACC team. But I also try to learn a little bit from past experience. And this time last year, we were going through, making our projections, making our updates for a set of other teams that moved from the AAC to a Power 4 conference. Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, BYU, similar, but from the independent ranks. And we were across the board too high on all 4 of those teams. So tried to learn a little bit, wanted to make a little bit of an adjustment. One thing that goes into our rating sort of at the very, very end, we give a little bit of a bonus based on some of those key stats that we talk about in our they're on our team profiles, things like points per drive and net yards per play, things like that. We give a little bit of a bonus or penalty based on how those stats, stack up. It is sort of to give a little bit of an extra boost to the best teams, a little bit of an extra penalty to the worst teams. We made that adjustment a few years ago to try to help give us a little more difference on the extreme ends as far as separating the best of the best from and the worst of the worst from the rest of the pack in the way we do our projections. So what I did with SMU, which did get a pretty good bonus based on those stats, because the vast majority of that was against group of 5 competition. They're no longer playing group of 5 competition. We just went ahead and reset what would have been a bonus of a couple of points to 0. And so took that away. That dropped SMU to 14th nationally, still higher than just about or than anybody else that I have seen so far as our rankings go. And we'll go through those here in just a minute. But this is a team that stacks up really, really well on paper. I worry just a little bit that we are overrating SMU based on roster strength, based on the production that these players have accumulated. I've had some discussions sort of behind the scenes. Do we need to make some adjustments, maybe rerun some of those production numbers based on strength of schedule prior? Had some similar thoughts and discussions as they relate to players moving, as they transfer from a Power 4 program to the Group of 5, or from Group of 5 or even FCS up a level or two. So there's some, there's definitely an understanding. I go in hopefully with eyes wide open that it's possible we are overrating SMU. Keep that in mind. It's also possible that everybody else is underrating SMU, and we've got a pretty good track record when it comes to SMU specifically. There have been years where we've been higher on the Mustangs than just about everybody else, and it worked out. Last year was one of those. We had SMU favored over Tulane in that AAC championship game. Don't believe there were many others out there that did, and it worked out. Perhaps. It's certainly understandable without Preston Stone why SMU would have been an underdog in that game, but the way our numbers work, it worked out for us that time. Maybe it will again this year, or also, maybe we just haven't fully learned the lesson of what we saw last season with those teams moving from the AAC to the Big 12. We'll have to see, of course, how it all shakes out. But what are some others saying? I mentioned that SMU is higher in our power rankings than just about, or is higher. I don't need to even hedge there. Is higher in our rankings than anyone else. Most every human rankings have been referring to folks like Stuart Mandel at The Athletic and Andy Staples of On3, their post-spring power rankings, top 25, what have you. Bruce Feldman's done a playoff projection, a week or so ago. Athlon Sports, of course, preseason magazines have more of a human-based. How do they expect this team to finish the season? What ranking do you expect them to finish? All of those do not have SMU in the top 25 at this point. Feldman did not have SMU expected to make the playoff. That's somewhat understandable if you look at the DraftKings odds as of this morning. SMU was 11-1 to make the college football playoff, which was the 39th team in the country as far as odds go. So expectations not particularly high in a lot of ways, but some of the computer ratings are much higher on the Mustangs, and ours are more, based on specifically numbers. How do these players rate individually? How do the coaches impact that? How does last season's team performance impact that, which we didn't make a major adjustment to because our team performance numbers are adjusted for strength of schedule. So hopefully we have properly captured that. But one of the more interesting ones that we started mentioning, the good folks at EA Sports, who of course are releasing the College Football 25 video game in a couple of weeks, have SMU as a top 20 team. They're actually the highest ranking other than ours that I've seen among the ones that we refer to consistently here. Phil Steele, his power poll has the Mustangs 21st. They're 22nd in Steele's preseason top 25, top 40 predictions. SP Plus is relatively high on SMU, sees the Mustangs as a top 25 team. They're 23rd. Beta Rank also has SMU 23rd, and ESPN's Football Power Index has the Mustangs 25th. Not inside the top 25, but Kelly Ford, the K Ford ratings have SMU 27th in his most recent update, I believe second version 2. So a lot of computers see SMU potentially as a top 25 team. Ours see even a little higher ceiling, perhaps, and we'll get into why that is. But how did last season go? Let's take a look specifically at our team profiles, our rundown. If you scroll down to the bottom, of our team profile schedule section. You'll see the 2023 results. Of course, SMU 11-win season. Couldn't ask for much better as far as sort of that bridge year between moving from the group of 5 to a Power 4 conference. Won their championship, of course, 26-14, had a 100% post-game win expectancy number in that win over Tulane, according to collegefootballdata.com, which we use for these post-game win expectancy numbers here. And you can see how they all add up there at the bottom as far as second order wins go. SMU deserved to be an 11-win team last season, had 10.91 expected wins as far as those advanced box scores go. Some struggles early against top competition. That is something to consider as the strength of schedule as a whole. The week in, week out talent that SMU is going to face this season is going to, be tougher, quite honestly, and understandably. So last season against Oklahoma, final score certainly wasn't an embarrassment. SMU played tough, but had just a 2% post-game win expectancy number in that game. The loss to rival TCU, similar, just 17% in the post-game number, but a 17-point differential in the final score. But most of the rest of the way, the conference games, certainly the non-conference games against non-Power 4 opponents, including Louisiana Tech, FCS opponent Prairie View, and then Charlotte, which I guess Charlotte, that was a conference game last year, right? I keep forgetting some of these, but SMU pretty dominant, right? That Charlotte win, 85%, was the lowest in conference play, again, according to collegefootballdata.com. See a lot of mid-90s the rest of the way, a few 100%. SMU is just a dominant team in conference play. It all, of course, did not carry over from the regular season. That is worth keeping in mind when we talk about where SMU ranked in team performance, where they ranked statistically. I've said this before, but if this is your first time with us, all of our team performance ratings, all of our stats that we reference here in the team profiles are regular season only and against FBS opponents only. So if you say, wow, those last two games against Tulane and Boston College, the offense was just not the same. SMU struggled so much in that bowl game, just 4% in the post-game win expectancy, couldn't get going offensively. Yes, you're right. But those numbers don't go into those team performance or the stats that we reference here. So on that note, where did SMU rank in a lot of those key metrics? You can see number 13 in overall team performance, so played like a top 15 team nationally. Again, that is adjusted for strength of schedule. So if SMU had put up the same stats in ACC play, perhaps they would have ranked as a top 10 team in team performance. But because, playing a little weaker schedule, got bumped down a bit there. 17th on offense as far as team performance goes. Pretty solid, both passing and rushing combined to boost that number up a bit into the top 20. And this SMU defense was really, really quite good. 14th in overall defensive team performance. Top 10 passing, number 8 against the run. And you can see, category by category here, top 10 in scoring margin, again, against FBS opponents only in the regular season only. But number 6, scoring nearly 40 points per game, 6th nationally. Top 10 in net yards per play at 1.88 in the positive. Top 10 in net points per drive, which might be my single favorite stat that we reference, that coming from Brian Fremeau of bcftoys.com. Net yards per pass attempt, SMU was 12th. Net success rate, top 15 nationally. And in the College Football Data's EPA equivalent, PPA, on a marginal basis, number 6 nationally. So a lot of top 10 top 20 ratings defensively, a few top 10s on offense, but overall just a very, very solid team and a tough team to beat last season. How did this SMU roster, carry over? How does it carry over from last season to this? We'll get ready and pull up our returning production database, which, as you mentioned, SMU top 10 nationally. And that's a big reason why SMU is as high as they are in our power rankings. We don't have a returning production piece that goes into the calculation, but because SMU ranks top 10 in returning production, those individual player ratings carry over and get a little bit of a boost based on experience and on-field production. And that's a big reason why SMU is as high as it is in our roster strength ratings right now. But as you can see here, Preston Stone coming back, assuming he's fully healthy, which all indications are he is and will be this season, along with Kevin Jennings, who got some key experience as a starter with Stone sidelined at the end of last year. But SMU brings back the vast majority of its passing production, the snaps taken among quarterbacks last season, and Stone was excellent. Over 3,100 yards, nearly 3,200 yards, 9.3 yards per pass attempt. If he's able to repeat that this season, SMU should be in great shape. 28-6 touchdown to interception ratio, quite solid. And Stone can run it a little bit as well. Nearly 200 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns. But that running back room, bit of a surprise they were able to bring back all 3 of these guys, Jalen Knighton, L.J. Johnson Jr., Kamar Wheaton, one of the deeper and honestly, at least on paper, most talented running back rooms in the country. All 3 of those players with over 400 yards on the ground. No one bell cow, but so maybe we don't love that for fantasy purposes. But as far as keeping players fresh and healthy entering a season where the difficulty strength of schedule is tougher, that's a good thing to have, depth at that running back position. The receiving room, similar. I mean, a lot of players coming back, including top target among wide receivers, Jake Bailey, top target overall. RJ Maryland, one of the most productive tight ends in college football. Bailey was held out of the end zone last season, but expect if he puts up similar, target numbers, reception numbers, he's going to bounce back and get in that end zone this year. But Moochie Dixon back, Romello Brinson, Jordan Hudson, Keyshawn Smith, Roderick Daniels, just a fairly rare amount of players returning. Did not transfer out looking for more playing time. SMU got these guys on the field a lot. Were able to, get everybody at least, enough targets that they felt like they were willing to come back. The addition of Brashard Smith from Miami is an interesting one. He was a wide receiver at Miami, listed as a running back on the SMU roster, expected to play a little bit of a hybrid role this year. Excited to see what that looks like as well. The one potential question mark is on the offensive line. SMU could have returned all 5 starters from last season, but Branson Hickman transfers out, Marcus Bryant transfers out. Hickman ended up at Oklahoma, I believe, Bryant at Missouri. So, obviously those were talented and players who were sought after. Hickman, yes, at Oklahoma, started at center last season for SMU, and then Bryant, of course, the left tackle. So those are big losses, especially on paper, but even more so, I should say, on paper. But Hiron Wright, 10 starts as well, where Ben Sparks and Justin Osborne didn't start every single game last season. Sort of divided some of that among others there, but a lot of players with starting experience return. PJ Williams got 3 starts last season. They bring in Andrew Chambly and Savion Boyd, who have starting experience. So even though it could have been better, could have had 5 players. Really, there were 6 who were designated as starters among this group last season, but could have had 5 returning starters based on that 51% of starts from last year's team. But they're still doing okay as far as experience goes on the offensive line, and though that could have been a major strength, shouldn't be a major weakness. The defense, this group here sorted by top tacklers returning. The top 7 tacklers are back, 8 of the top 9, 10 of the top 12. Also bring in some transfers that should beef up the depth, especially up front. You see 4 defensive linemen transferring in, including guys who were starters at other Power 4 programs before transferring in to SMU this season. So again, on paper, SMU looks quite good as far as an experience and returning production standpoint goes. How does it stack up as far as the depth chart projections, other key numbers that we look at? SMU is number 7 in our overall roster strength ratings, number 7 on the offensive side of the ball, number 10 defensively. A healthy Preston Stone is key to that. He is, they're in the low 90s as far as his individual player rating goes, his video game rating. Not sure he's going to be a 92, 93 in the EA Sports game when it comes out, but the way that we calculate it, he's worthy of that. You can see how position by position SMU stacks up when we're talking just raw talent. Usually I'm referencing our average calculation of the 247 Sports composite ratings, but we also have average ratings for rivals and on 3. But you can see top 50 talent at the quarterback position, but when it's adjusted for experience and production, if you look over here on the right-hand side of the chart, much closer to top 25, number 26 nationally. The running back room, I mentioned, one of the most talented in the country on paper as far as raw 247 composite ratings go, average ratings, number 4 nationally, number 5 in the other 2 systems, but top 10 nationally when you take into account experience and production. That takes into account, other running back rooms maybe lean on a single player more, add more production points to the top running back. SMU maybe hurts a little bit of that with the way that they divided that workload last season, but still a talented group because SMU in part certainly does recruit well, has recruited very well, especially compared to other Group of 5 conference teams prior to making the jump to the ACC. But being located in Dallas, as everyone knows, is an area that produces a ton of talented college football players, and a lot of them, perhaps from Dallas specifically, or the Metroplex, or North Texas in general, maybe went somewhere else for their freshman or first couple of seasons out of high school, but things didn't work out for whatever reason, decide to come back closer to home, and a decent amount of those players signed with SMU. And this is more anecdotal, but my thought is, SMU seems to have hit a little bit higher on these players than most. I think of the way that prior to the transfer portal being, as common as it has become over the last couple of years, that a team like SMU and a team like USF had sort of a similar way of doing it. They were on the high side as far as really leaning into transfers. SMU had a lot more success, it seemed like, finding players that were able to compete at a high level, that played a little bit more like the 4-star type recruits that they were pegged as being coming out of high school, than a team like USF. Just one example. Programs in the American that are located, with a lot of talented high school players in the area, brought in a lot of transfers, guys coming back from home. SMU has done a really, really good job of surviving and thriving with that, as a way of building its roster. With the move to the ACC, we've already seen the high school recruiting ratings take a little bit of a jump, see more, 4-star players out of high school committing to SMU. If that continues, then I think that, the ceiling is perhaps even higher for SMU. But the way it shakes out right now, you can see the talent stacks up pretty well. Number 21 in raw talent, those raw 24/7 composite ratings on offense, 33rd on defense, top 25 nationally, 23rd in those numbers. But again, based on that top 10 returning production, the amount of experience that this roster has, they're top 10 and number 7 in our average position strength ratings, number 7 in roster strength. This is a really, really good looking team on paper, has no major weaknesses that I can see, just here on paper. There's a comment on YouTube, Rangers King 669. Let's see if I can post this here, talking about Ja'Kai Clark, who we have projected to start at center, replace Hickman. Says, don't be surprised if he returns to his form from 2022. Arrived out of shape at SMU last season, expect to play a key role this year, and he's definitely ready to go. So something I failed to mention, but yeah, Ja'Kai Clark, if he's able to return fully healthy, really does help solidify one of those key spots on the offensive line. Justin Osborne's been an all-conference performer in his past at right tackle. You see that we don't currently have any of those first-year transfers coming in that are highlighted at blue projected to start, but any of them could emerge as starters. And if something were to happen to that starting lineup, feel pretty good about the depth that is there as well. Defensively, a little bit overlooked, but still a really, really talented group of defenders. A lot of transfers here, of course. Multiple transfers we expect to start on the defensive line. We've got Mike Lockhart and Jafari Harvey penciled in as starters. Anthony Booker and Jared Harrison Hunt could potentially play very significant amount of snaps as well. But as you can see, even players not projected to be starters, Isaiah Smith, who played less than a quarter of SMU snaps last season, did not appear in the starting lineup, was very productive, 7 production points last year. So there's depth here, proven players on this SMU defensive line. The linebackers, both starters, return in the secondary, do not have a full-time starter returning at corner, but a lot of experience at the safety position, and then more depth as well. I mean, even, you see backups here at safety playing nearly 40% of snaps last season. Players like Deuce Harmon and Jaden Milner-Jones adding to that depth through the transfer portal. There are just few weak spots. The only real concern that I have goes back to the comparisons, and maybe it's an unfair comparison, maybe it's very fair, to Cincinnati, Houston, BYU, and UCF. Across the board last season, our numbers were too optimistic. All those teams ranked a little too high in roster strength. Those production points added up a little too well, you could say. Our power rankings, as a result, just got a little too high for those teams. That could definitely be a lesson learned, or maybe lesson not learned, because we haven't made very many adjustments. Just that sort of stat bonus there at the very, very end is the only change we've made. So as a result, maybe SMU is a bit overrated. You can see here as we look officially at the projections, which DraftKings this morning had SMU, the win total is at 8 for their regular season win total. We've got SMU projected to go way over that. 9.22 is our win total projection. I've referenced this number just about every time, every preview so far. But again, if this is your first time with us, we have done every FBS team for an official win total projection since 2021. We have a 60.4% win rate on those. Last season, our numbers were 55.6%. That was our worst year, but I still feel pretty good about 55% there. And so how does it stack up? There's another question here in the comments. How do we factor in the perceived weakness of the schedule? And SMU does rank, 67th in our strength of schedule rankings, which is on the very low end as far as a Power 4 opponent. That is a real positive. Starting ACC play with Florida State and Louisville, the two teams that played for the conference championship last season, is difficult on paper. But the rest of the way, you could not ask for a better draw, in my opinion. Do have to make the trip to Stanford, but of course, SMU doesn't have to travel as many miles to get to Palo Alto than a team like Duke, North Carolina, Syracuse, for example. So it's a long trip, but not quite as long, not as big of a deal. And it's not like Stanford's, home field advantage is all that significant. Do have to go sort of the same distance the other way to go to Duke the next week, back-to-back road games. I'm always a little bit weary of. And actually for SMU, even though there's a bye, an idle week after Louisville, 3 straight road trips, that I don't love. That has a tendency to add up, wear a team down a little bit. So I do worry, just a bit about the front half of the conference schedule for SMU, but getting Stanford, getting Duke, where I think you can legitimately say, even if we're overrating what experience and production does for this SMU roster, that this SMU team is probably deeper and more talented than both Stanford and Duke at this point. But then the rest of the schedule, again, sets up really, really well as far as who you're drawing. Home against Pitt, another off week. Home against Boston College, a little bit of a revenge opportunity there from the bowl game. At Virginia, and then home against Cal. There's no Clemson here, right? There's no North Carolina, who our numbers are relatively high on. It looks good on paper, and compared to other Power 4 teams, it's one of the more manageable schedules just based on average team strength, average roster strength, average team performance from last season. Things set up very, very well for SMU. They should be big favorites against both Nevada in week 0, FCS opponent Houston Christian in week 2. BYU might be a little closer than our current projection. Our numbers really, really like SMU, really dislike BYU. So we've got SMU as almost a 20-point favorite there. My opinion would be that maybe that's a little bit closer to a 2 touchdown projection, maybe even a little closer than that. We have SMU as a favorite over TCU. TCU, obviously, as we discussed earlier, beat SMU last season, has more of a Power 4 track record. And so could understand some folks thinking that that projection is too big and that's going to be a much, much closer game. But think that SMU is going to be very competitive against Florida State and Louisville. That Louisville game is the only one we have the Mustangs as an underdog. That won't, I'm sure, be the only game the Mustangs are an underdog officially, according to the odds makers in the market. But our numbers are really, really optimistic that the Mustangs can sort of capitalize on this move to the ACC with top 10 experience and returning production. A very talented roster where they've hit on a lot of transfers coming in, but also have had a lot of success recruiting the high school level as well. Preston Stone, probably the key member of that discussion. And that it all could sort of come together at the right time, making this move to the ACC and sort of the real favorable, again, the word I'm choosing to use, schedule here, where they get a young FSU team early, get a Louisville team that Certainly has a lot of movement as well, even though our numbers are pretty high on Louisville. If they're able to weather that, maybe go 1-1 in those games, the rest of the schedule sets up well enough that this SMU team could be in the ACC title game conversation in November. The strength of schedule, even though it looks good compared to other Power 4 teams, is a step up for SMU compared to years past. So that's worth considering. It's also worth considering that we haven't, really dove in or really fully adjusted those production points based on previous strength of schedules. So, maybe we're a little high on SMU, but it could work out. It did last year. It has in years past, the way our numbers work for SMU. So as it stands right now, either we are really overrating SMU, or maybe the rest of college football is underrating the Mustangs. So we'll find out soon enough. In 50 days, the college football season starts. In 50 days, SMU will be on the field in Reno taking on Nevada. So that is going to do it for us today and this week. We will be back on Monday. I believe Clemson is the next team up in our power rankings. Yes, we'll be talking about another ACC team. It's 3 in a row for us, with Clemson as our 4th rated team in the ACC power rankings, number 15 nationally. Definitely still a contender and one of the top teams to beat in the ACC. So join us again on Monday. Hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. If you have not already, please do subscribe to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. Please do like this video, share it with a friend, especially if you're an SMU fan excited about the move to the ACC. But also, if you haven't already, please consider becoming a member at campustocanton.com. You can join us for as little as $2.99 per month at the walk-on or scholarship level. You can get a 15% off annual membership if you sign up at the NIL level. Get access to that new and improved roster management and draft tool, or get access to our team profiles, our returning production database for all 134 FBS teams, as we used in today's preview. Our stat projections, which also have team pages for all 134 FBS teams, are going to be available later this month. That's also, all of that is available for all 22 and C2C winning edge tier members. If you have questions on any of those tiers, reach out to me, reach out to Campus to Canton. We'll definitely help walk you through that. But until then, we'll be back on Monday. And until then, have a great weekend and take care.